but it was very affirming that like God loves me enough that he brought me here and he knows this is how I can get to heaven. Picture habit, picture tail.
Yes, yeah, that we do. We have tails,
front and back tails,
and gills in our hood. Yeah, we're basically fish. Okay, so yeah. Anyways,
we're not weird. We're normal.
Yeah, totally normal. Yep. Join the monastery, see the world. That's a motto. And yeah, join the monastery, and it's not an insane asylum. That's like
2 mottos. Really easy to live by.
So close, you know. There are some people who I think are only in the monastery because a psych ward didn't want to take them. But
we accept everyone.
But yeah, exactly. Yeah, we don't judge. You know, it's like I just was up at our off-campus retreat property having a Cuban-style dinner. One of our monks cooked it. It was phenomenal. I haven't eaten that many black beans probably in my entire life. But like, you know, beggars can't be choosers. So he's like, yep, pile on those black beans, Brother Francisco. I'm like, okay, I hate beans. But like, actually, it did taste really good.
Yeah. You would love Brazil then. You need to visit our priory there.
Oh, okay, I will.
Lots of beans.
Beans. The musical fruit, the more you eat, the more you chew, right? That's at least what my grandpa always said. So, yeah, hello, everyone. Welcome back to All Good in the Brotherhood podcast. I am the Brother Francisco Whitaker, and the one and the only. Good thing there's only one. And this is the one and only Brother Bosco Hough
of
the Order of St. Benedict.
Yes.
Bosco's been with us before, almost, I think about 30 episodes ago, if you can believe it. It's that many ago already.
Wow.
We talked about Lectio Divina and how monks pray scripture. So if you haven't seen or watched that episode, make sure you go back and check that out. But today we're going to be talking about something a little closer to home in regards to Bosco.
Hopefully my forever home.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Yeah. Which is professing solemn vows. Mm-hmm. So Bosco is less than a month away, like 3 weeks, I think, right?
Yeah.
That is wild. 3 weeks from taking his final profession to St. Vincent. I took mine last year. So I'm approaching a year already in solemn vows, which is also kind of wild.
That's crazy.
But it's, time for Bosco to make his life commitment to the community. So just to start, how I know you had a petition, so that's something before we even we decide to take for sure vows. The community has to decide if we're going to take vows to it. So a monk petitions and writes like a letter of intent that is then read to the community, basically saying this monk then says he is ready to take solemn vows to the community. So Bosco was presented back in May. He was voted on, passed with flying colors. I wasn't there, but that's what I heard.
All the way this past year, Brother Francisco has been like, "Ooh, I can vote on you. You better be nice to me." Blah blah blah. And then the day that I got voted on, where were you?
I left for California.
Yeah, he left for his brother's graduation, and she was like, "I can't vote on you, but it would be a yes if I could."
It was so funny. I would rag him when he's like, "Be careful, Bosco. That could be a down vote. That's an up vote." And then when it actually came time to voting, I didn't show up. So he passed, and then now he's all set to take solemn vows in 3 weeks. So how are you feeling about that right now, just as you are?
If you had asked me this question probably last Thursday, I would probably say, I think in a healthy way, like nervous. Mm-hmm. I've been thinking about this question the past 4 years, but most seriously this past year, just this concept of like forever. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it was just kind of like scary because you don't know what's going to be happening in the next like 10 years, next 5 years, like what's going to happen tomorrow. And so just like jumping in and not knowing what to expect was like really nerve-wracking. Mm-hmm. But I just came back from my solemn vows retreat, and I had 5 days of just like complete silence almost, and just like listening to the Lord, and he can really speak volumes in that silence.
Absolutely.
And it was an emotional roller coaster, but he really like affirmed me in like my discernment process thus far. And so I came back, and Father Sean met me at the door, and he kind of was like, you just look a lot more at peace.
Oh, that's so good.
So now I'm just very ready to like take that plunge and start this this new life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so good to hear. My own, solemn vows was definitely like a strong period of affirmation from the Lord that, like, yes, this is what I called you to. You're not crazy. You haven't deluded yourself. You're not running away from something. What would you say, like, so in that silence, because before you left, you said this was like the first like retreat in that there wasn't like a bunch of other things going on. You've been to like charismatic retreats or men's retreats or stuff like that, but this was a true definition of retreat, to go away and, like, you said it's encounter God only in silence. How was going into that, like, the first day? Because I mean, just knowing Bosco's personality, he's a bit of a chatty guy. So yeah, I mean, even though I'm more introverted than you are, I still had a lot of difficulty, like, really entering into that silence. So how was that experience, and then how was your encounter with God in that silence?
Yeah, the first day was probably the first day, and the last day were definitely the hardest. The first day, because just realizing how noisy I am was just like very humbling, because even though I didn't have anyone to talk to, like, I tend to hum a lot in my room, like while I'm like on a walk, stuff like that. I just realized how many just like random noises I make just to fill the silence, like grunting and just like stupid sounds that I make. But I also, like, too, it's not even just like vocal sounds. I realized that I make just a lot of like movements and like tapping things. And I really tried to like minimize that too, because I realized I was just like, when I do that, I'm trying to distract myself from like fully entering into something. So it was all like very difficult. Again, just because I was nervous about what God was going to reveal about my heart. I still have a lot of stuff to figure out just internally. I was really nervous about like what He was going to bring up. A lot of stuff was brought up. It was all really good. And then going into the last day was difficult, because just not speaking for 4 or 5 days, I just like wanted any opportunity I could. I was like, want to go to someone. But I really restrained myself, and but even like in that time, it was really just good to just humble myself and just continue in the process of listening.
That's good. Listening. Well, that's a key word for Benedictine spirituality. The first word in the rule actually is listen. But it's kind of the last one, at least I often pay attention to. Instead, it's I heard a priest say one time, in Scripture, Samuel is told by Eli to say the words to God, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." He said, but too often we say, "Listen, Lord, for your servant is speaking." And just like it needs to be the other way around. What then, like, either in that retreat or in this year, kind of, just because the last year of simple vows and preparing for solemn vows is definitely like this is it. Like, we're every day closer. Is one less day I have to decide if this is really what I'm doing. And then the retreat just kind of like puts that on hyper mode. It's like, oh wow, I'm actually doing this. So you said you were a little nervous, and then you kind of came out peaceful. What would you say that you learned about just like your own, I guess, disposition, or your own like heart and soul in discernment, that like, okay, not all of these things are being taken care of maybe, but like these were the things that God wanted to take care of, so I knew, yes, this is where I want you to be. If that question makes sense. I don't know. I started one question and didn't realize I didn't like it, so I finished it with a different one.
I think you started off with like what they reflecting on this year.
Yeah.
And I can go into the
perfect.
Yeah, into like the retreat.
Interpret my question however you want.
Okay. This year I started off this juniorate. It felt different from the past 2 years in the juniorate, because I don't know, I even though like you're not the big man on campus, like on our fifth floor where the juniors stay, there kind of was like that leadership rule of making sure that everyone was like working together, they were like vibing well, and that we were just kind of like a good group that like would kind of grow this past year together. And so I had kind of that feeling on my shoulders. It's not a bad thing, but I wanted to be like the best example for these other guys who are kind of growing in their monastic formation. So I kind of asked myself early on, what is, out of the 3 vows, I don't know if your viewers know what the 3 vows are.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and shameless plug to go to some of our Benedictine Spirituality 101 episodes. We just finished a 3-part series on each vow. So you should know what we're talking about.
Yeah, so I reflected on the 3 vows, and I asked myself, like, which vow for me is the most difficult to follow? Mm-hmm. And I think most people would probably say obedience, but I think coming from a family of 9 kids and like being a teacher in my past life, I don't want to say obedience comes easy, but it's not the most difficult.
More natural.
I would say for me is stability, which I think goes into like my difficulty of being silent. Because for me, stability, before I entered the monastery, I would tend to like go to restaurants with friends or like look for experiences or always be on Instagram and stuff. To like distract myself from like actually like sitting and like contemplating on like the difficult things and then where I am and stuff. And so this past year was kind of like the theme of stability kept just reoccurring constantly. Another thing that kind of comes up in the monastery often, our monastery is unique in a way that we're very apostolic. Apostolic.
Yep.
And so we're always coming up with this phrase, stability of the heart. And the way that we've used it has always like rubbed me the wrong way. Because people always say stability of the heart is like you can be anywhere in the world, but like you carry Saint Vincent in your heart. I'm like, what does that mean?
It kind of sounds like a cop out to me.
It's very, very much of a cop out, and I always just go back to like the text. I always get back to the rule. Like, what did the Benedict actually mean when he said stability? And I do think that he was intending for the stability of the heart, but I don't think it's exactly the way that we phrase it. Through this past year, I reflected on what stability meant for me, and I'm not fully prepared for this, but in education, proper pedagogy of like teaching is for little kids. It's like you begin with the concrete and then you teach them all the way to the abstract. So you begin with manipulatives. For like math, for example, you begin with like manipulatives and then you eventually teach them about like the abstract knowledge of like numbers and stuff like that. So I kind of thought of the same thing of like stability. We begin with the physical stability of like the abbey, the location, the building and stuff. And eventually, because you're stable in that one place, you're also stable with the people at that place, either the monks in that place, or like the community surrounding it. And in that way, we know through the rule and through different fathers that being stable with your brothers, like you begin converting your heart. Like you have to begin to compromise. You begin being charitable. You have to sometimes like they hurt you on accident. You kind of have to like deal with that and like contemplate stuff in that way. And then because you're living with those men, then you go to more abstract where I shouldn't say abstract, you're going more spiritual, where you're being stable of the way of life. And monks, our entire way of life is centered around prayer. And so you begin to like
set structure.
Exactly. And so you begin to like kind of like go to that funnel of that you're being charitable with your brothers, and then you're devoting yourself to prayer, devoting to Christ, and eventually you go to like the final part, which is stability of the heart, which I think stability of the heart is abiding in God. So the funnel is like funneling you to that one final like Benedict doesn't say much about like what is required of man to join the monastery. The only thing that he says that a novice must have is he must be searching for God. And so I think stability of the heart is that searching for God and abiding in Him. So that's really what I've been thinking about this past year, is like, how is our stability structured? And of course, we have many different apostolates, and men are supposed to have stability of the heart, but it isn't just like a fuzzy word, but it's actually you're supposed to be devoted to God and searching for Him in the context of our community as a monastery.
I just want to acknowledge I love that, and that like redeems the phrase stability of heart for me, because until like just you talking now really was kind of annoyed when people say like, oh well, yeah, no, these monks are away, but like, you know, we have stability of heart. And I'm like, but do you, or do you even you just repeating what you've been told you have.
Yeah.
So I think that's really good of you to reflect on that. And in my own like preparation for Solemn Vows last year, stability also came up, and just like the Lord really showed me like how well interwoven the three vows are. In one particular image, which was Christ's hand pierced and crucified. And we both went to actually the same retreat center, which was the St. Thomas More House of Prayer up in Cranberry Township, Pennsylvania, which is between Oil City and Franklin. And in their chapel, they have a massive crucifix. And the chapel's pretty small, so you can get really close sitting there. And it's powerful to pray there. And I just remember being kind of enraptured and just kind of lost in meditation of just kept on staring at Jesus' hand on this crucifix. And then it occurred to me that like Jesus' pierced hands in a way is a perfect reflection of all three vows, starting with stability, that he is literally forced to be stable in place on the cross by that nail. And that causes him to, and it is also obedience to the Father, and then that conversion, which is like, becoming, for us, conversion, as we talked about in episodes before, like conversion of heart, or becoming the monk who God calls us to be, he is fulfilling perfectly the will of the Father, so the conversion. And he had said, not my will, but yours be done, and he's completely now doing the will. So, but the stability of place, literally being crucified, moved him to being stable for the people, like you were talking about, his mother and St. John there, then he could give himself to them. And then finally, what does he say? Like, my God, he cries out, this searching for, seeking God. So then the connection I made was stability, therefore, is suffering. Like, you can't learn to actually be stable in a place without also enduring suffering through it. And by forcing yourself to stay there, though, not that we become comfortable with suffering, but that stability of heart is accepting suffering, knowing that this is God's will for me right now, and that I'm not going to be shaken. I've been reading a lot of extra Stoic philosophy this last week in preparation for this book we're working on, and I'm not like totally sold on everything Stoics, but one thing that I just keep on reading over and over again, they said is like, it is your choice that the things outside of you cause you harm. That is a choice. You ascend to these things causing you harm. The only thing that actually can cause you harm is a disruption, they say, of reason. But if we're Christian, I guess conversion of it would be like your dependence on God, or like your understanding of God. That's the only thing so suffering, not that it's inconsequential, but we can get through it. But the stability kind of, I think, forces us and teaches us how to suffer better. Yeah. So, yeah. But just to speak to what you're saying, I agree. Yeah. I agree.
I'm glad. I'm glad the Lord was working.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. But I think a little bit about what you were speaking into, about like, even though God may be asking us into like this suffering, and that the suffering will bring us closer to Him. That's like another thing that kind of was brought up in my my vows. Brother Gilbert wrote a reflection for me to read, and he said that you spoke about like humility and all that, I think, and he said that a basic definition of humility is living in and accepting like the truth. And so I asked like, what is this truth? That I need to like
sound a little like Pontius Pilate there. What is truth?
Yeah. But as I kind of like realized that I think for all of humanity, the biggest truth is that like we aren't that really, in the grand scheme of things, we aren't strong, we're not powerful, like we really are insignificant in the grand scheme of things. But like what can make us strong, what can make us powerful is having Christ live within us. One of my favorite quotes, I texted my aunt this, and I would like to, can I read it?
Yeah,
Am I allowed
please.
to read it here? This would probably change my entire retreat experience. Talking about like how like we are insignificant, but we can become significant by living through Christ. The quote is, "Your life is marked by magnanimity. When you possess within you the courage to seek what is great and become worthy of it. The impulse to be great, however, must always reside in the protective barrier, that retaining wall which is humility. At every instance, letting others see what is great in you is to let others see that it is no longer you who live, but Christ who lives in you." I just thought that was powerful, because again, like I was saying, like we are called to suffer, and we're called to like die to ourselves daily. Not just for the fact of suffering. Like God doesn't want us just to suffer,
it's right.
but it's for a purpose. It's for us to be able to live most fully as people and to live in that joy of Christ.
So would you say then that stability has taken on a new meaning for you? Or because I know you said like of all of them that's the hardest. Has this helped make it easier, or just help like you see it for what it is?
Stability or humility?
Stability, I guess, because that's where we started. But I guess humility too. I think everything's so intertwined here.
I think it's good because I think so. The retreat was like a emotional roller coaster. I cried a lot, but I think the biggest part of it was just me realizing that, like that truth, and like why I'm being called to the monastery, why I need the stability, is because so often I trick myself into thinking that like I don't need a savior. I can pick myself up by my own bootstraps and stuff, and I don't need the monastery. The monastery needs me and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, like I am very weak. I'm a sinner. There's things that I'm not proud of, and like I'm only able to like get to heaven through Christ, of course, but he's calling me to get to heaven through this monastic way of life. And that's very humbling, but it was very affirming that like God loves me enough that he brought me here and he knows this is how I can get to heaven. So just kind of like be humble and trust in him and realize that he is my savior. And like, and that's like, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And yeah, I love the humility aspect of just like, yep, I feel like I could do this myself, but God has designed that. No. And maybe like, yeah, you probably could. You probably honestly, Bosco, could do really well on your own. And like,
I don't know about that.
Well, no, like, let me get to this point. And like my brothers, especially my brother Tom, like love him, but like sometimes he like says things in this regard. He's like, if you didn't become a monk and like you went into some kind of business, like you'd be top dog, like pretty fast, and like you do really, really well, just so you know. And I'm like, thanks. Like I just, and what I mean is like, you'd be a successful teacher, kids would love you. They do love you, you do well. And maybe, yeah, you would make it pretty well on your own, but you wouldn't make it as well as you could. Yeah. And it might seem like, oh God, is this really where I have to be? It's just like, yep. And you won't always figure out, you might even, I as well, might even die not sure fully, like, okay, how everything that happened, right? All that goes on in the divine plan will never be fully revealed to us until we get into heaven. So there might be days 10 years from now we're like, man, solemn vows, was that like really? What do you know what I mean? But no, like that truth is something that I believe, that I know, I encourage you to hold on to, I work on holding on to, that like, yes, God is designed for me to be here with this community right now. And my holiness is dependent on these people. And that's simply that's the base fact. It's a scary that's fact. It.
Yeah.
Which is, yeah, it is scary. And their holiness depends on you. Like you actually have to pull your weight for them.
So that's like my last part of the retreat was kind of ended in that for some reason, which I think it was through the Holy Spirit, the idea of marriage kept coming up. And I know in marriage, both people are wedded together to become one flesh. In order to that, they both can direct each other to heaven. Yeah. And that's like, that was my last reflection, was that like I'm in a sense, like being wedded to this community.
Yep.
And that, like you just said, we're both going to be bringing, like, hopefully I'll be able to help some men get to heaven. And I know I've already seen in the past 4 years, they're bringing me closer to heaven too. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that was just very another humbling thing too, that like this, we're on this like beautiful journey together. So.
Yeah, dude. And it's a roller coaster here too. You know, that's, it is wonderful. Some of my absolute best times of my life have been in the monastery. Some of my absolute hardest times, if not actually definitely the hardest times of my life, have been in the monastery. And definitely a temptation in the world is to try to like always capitalize only having those good experiences and running away from the bad. Mm-hmm. And if you experience the bad, that's like almost a sign like, oh, don't do this thing. And no, if that's how Christ redeemed us, he would have run away from the cross. Mm-hmm. But he went into suffering. Again, suffering is just, I think, becomes a theme in when you're in your vocation. It is not a place free of suffering. It's just the place where your suffering is most, I don't know,
redeemed.
Yeah. I guess most
meritorious.
And you're in the place where God's grace can work on you most effectively to endure that suffering. Yeah, I feel like I'm kind of all over the place right now. I don't know. It's kind of like 11 o'clock at night.
It's late.
So
that's all my bad.
Yeah. I didn't get back until late either. But Bosco texted me. I'm like, oh, you can, like, I said, you can, you were praying and you're like, I said, oh, go ahead and finish. And you're like, no, trust me, the later I stay up, the more incoherent I get. At that point. And I'm also definitely getting there. But, okay, so I guess maybe a last question for you, or just a thought is, so if you were talking to someone, I know you've had conversations with guys discerning the monastery, or even maybe, I don't know, with young women discerning religious life, but I certainly have dealt with a lot of guys who they're kind of always on this like, oh, I'm like waiting for a sign or whatever, or I'm just not really sure, I'm going back and forth, or they seem very definitive, like, well, nope, I know for sure God's not calling me to that. I have a very short fuse for these kind of excuses these days, but on a positive note, what would you say is just like a word of encouragement, or just like looking back now, you're taking solemn vows, looking back 5 years ago to when you were getting ready to enter the apostasy, what's something you would say to yourself discerning back then to be like, look, I know you're thinking and worried about all of these things, but this is what I have to say to you.
Yeah. I tell this to guys, but like discernment with action. I think too often, I know I did this. Too often we get stuck in our heads and like we're waiting for like a sign, or like we're like waiting for like the right moment. Like there's no better moment than now. And so I think part of it is that we don't discern with action, we discern with like our thoughts, because like we almost like don't trust like God will direct us in the right direction.
Yeah.
I just try to tell other guys that like, if you really trust God, and you trust that He's leading you into your vocation, discern with action. If you're discerning like the master way of life, but you don't know, visit the monastery.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually go. And then God might be like this is not a place for you, and He'll shut that door pretty quickly, make it pretty evident. Or He might be like, this might be a place, and He'll give you some peace. He'll give you a really good conversation. He might give you, one of the monks might give you like a book to read, and that might open another door. But you'll never will have any of those answers or those questions answered if you never went to that monastery.
Yep.
Or if you're discerning marriage, like you're never gonna know if a girl's the right one for you unless you go on a date with her.
Yeah, exactly.
Like take that risk. Again, like you might enter into suffering because she might say no, or the monastery might reject you or whatever. But like the most human thing I think is to suffer. So we shouldn't. Suffering hurts, but we shouldn't be afraid of it, because that's where we, discernment can lead to suffering, but that's kind of where we can get our answers. And
I definitely, like, I've found guys who it seems like if their discernment brings them to a point of difficulty or suffering, to them that's like, oh, well, then that's definitely a sign that like that's not where God wants me to be. Like, to me, it's almost a sign that that's definitely where God wants you to be, because St. Paul talks about, those who he called, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his son. So if you're called by God, he's going to already be conforming you to the image of Christ. And that conforming process just is simply suffering. We were at this Eucharistic procession, Eucharistic pilgrimage. Sorry, I don't know. My ear started ringing. Yeah, sorry. I just got this really weird look. Sorry. My ear started ringing like really, really badly, and I thought it was the microphone. Anyways, I'm sorry. You didn't say anything.
Holy Spirit.
Anyways, the National Eucharistic Pilgrimage came through the Greensburg Diocese, and we were there last week, right? Yeah. We got to serve. We were thorophers.
It was awesome.
We went through the streets of Jeanette.
Speaking about suffering, I got a blister because I was thorophers so hard.
Did you really?
I did. I
On
was
your
so proud
thumb?
of it right here.
That's so. I love that.
Scars for Jesus.
Hey, that was where you get calluses, right? And they say calluses and chalices, right? Not the old, like
These hands are for calluses and for chalices.
exactly. Yes, both. Anyways, there was that. I'm not trying to like call any kid out, but we met this kid who was altar serving, which is good. And I think Bosco even asked, or Finbar, one of the two, you guys asked like, oh, have you like, you discerning, or have you thought about like religious life? It's like, oh yeah, I thought about it, but no. Yeah. And he's like, I thought about it for a few years. And then when one of you guys asked, is he still in high school? And he said, yeah. I'm like, then bro, you haven't figured anything out. Like you don't know. Yeah. And just, it really grinds my gears that people, like you said, just think that discernment is to think a lot about something, or that they even have thought about the idea of possibly considering doing something. Like, there's so many steps removed. Yes. It's like when you discern to eat, when you're done, you actually eat. You don't just sit there like, maybe I'll have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich today. Maybe I'll have tuna. And then just sit there forever. Like, no, that's how you starve, right? You actually come to a decision and you eat food. Yeah. Do you always love the food you make? No. But guess what? It takes care of it that moment. Yep. And that's what natural discernment needs to be. It's just like, right now, figure out this next step. I know Brother Finbar is really big about like discerning the next big step. Yep. And slowly doing those things will lead you down the road. We kind of treat discernment as a sprint and not a marathon, that like, oh, I'll figure it out right now, as opposed to slowly making steps and then God bringing me to the finish line. Because I know for both of us, discernment didn't end when we entered the monastery. It just heightened. Like taking solemn vows is also a discernment process. It's not just like, oh, I wake up one day, I guess I'm making solemn vows today. Let's go. Yeah. I don't know if you have anything to follow up with that.
No. I also wanted to add too that, I think a lot of guys, like they also like, maybe some of them like do like, because like they're friends with the monk or friends with the priest, they're like, okay, I'll discern with action this one time. And they go and they might have a good experience, but then they don't really do anything with that experience. Like they don't bring it to prayer. And I think it's really important to begin also, developing a prayer life, because like you won't be able to hear how God's speaking to your heart if you don't continually like go to him and build that relationship. Because ultimately, like the basic definition of vocation is how we're called to holiness. And holiness is just having that relationship with the Lord. So if you aren't having that relationship with him, how are you ever going to know what your vocation is?
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I don't know if we'll have time, but I wanted to like share how how prayer and discerning with action kind of like led me to
please go for it.
This beautiful
vocation. Why did you even enter the monastery to begin with?
And basically God writes straight with very, very crooked lines, and I discern with action, basically all just to spite people, basically saying like, I am not called to this. Let me prove this abbey. Let me prove to you by these actions, and God proved me every time that I am called here.
Isn't he the goat?
Basically, like quick story. My mom and dad. I'm one of 9, And so my mom and dad didn't necessarily have the funds to send me to a private college. And so they were like, you need to go to like a community college or go to a cheaper school where you can like kind of go for free. But me being prideful, I noticed a lot of my friends were applying to St. Vincent and they were getting a lot of scholarship money from it. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, I'm going to apply here, even though my mom and dad said not to. And I'll prove to them that I'm capable of going to St. Vincent. Mm-hmm. Like, I had no idea where the school even was. I didn't even know it was just Catholic by name or actually Catholic. I just applied. Well, I ended up getting accepted, and my mom and dad were like super mad. But then they saw the scholarship money. They're like, okay, like we don't care where else you applied. Like you're going here because you're going for free. So God kind of like began my discernment by like bringing me to this place that I'd never been to before. Mm-hmm, but as soon as I got here as a freshman, like I just felt immediately at home. But then 4 years later, I went on the Footsteps of St. Benedict trip that the vocational office sponsors. I just got out of a relationship, and I had told God, I'm like, I'll begin discerning the priesthood now that I'm a free man. Is that too hard? Yeah. Now that I'm single, I'll say that.
Unattached.
So now that I'm single, but I'm like, I'm not called to be a monk. They're too old and they're too introverted and too weird. But priests are cool, so I'll.
We're not weird at all.
Yeah, and so, but this trip would like you could go to Rome for $1,000.
Yeah, dude.
And so I'm like, I'll discern.
Trust me, you want to discern a vocation when it comes to this.
I'll discern, but I know I'm not called. And so I went there and met like the coolest monks, like Father Max, Father Canise, or Brother Placid, Father Matthew Lambert was there too. So the
Father Benoit.
Father Benoit.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
He's a legend. In another he's just another level. This dude is wild.
So all these men were just really just wonderful influences and like really just showed me that like no, like monks are normal people too. And so I'm like, okay, I think I can become friends with a monk. And so that began just like developing like a good relationship. I ended up living on campus that following summer. Began working with monks, going to prayer with them. Father Max would invite me to different meals, and I just became very comfortable at St. Vincent, basically living the life of a monk. But Father Max kept encouraging me to like apply to the monastery. I'm like, no, it's not for me. I want to be a teacher. I want to be a priest. Blah blah blah. So he's like, okay. Well, he's like, tell that to. He's like, I scheduled a meeting with the abbot for you. Tell that to his
just
face,
right away.
Basically. Yeah.
tell it to the abbot's
face. It was on Good Friday, I remember, and he said, the abbot kind of like, yeah, we want you to apply. We want you to be a postulant this coming year. I'm like, I appreciate that, but I already told Father Max no. He's like, I understand, but he's like, I understand that you're also going to this mission trip that my nephew's going on. He's like, we are willing to pay for your trip if you become a postulant. That's probably not the best.
Coercion to become a monk.
Yeah, but he's like, we are confident that you are called to this monastery.
Wow.
So, like, we're willing to risk it for you. And so I'm like, okay, like I'll join, but I will join just to show you that I am not called here. So Brother Francis Gushin moved me in August 15th.
I was so pumped.
Yeah.
I was a novice.
Yeah.
Joined in July. I counted the days down for him to move in because I was an only novice. And in the middle of summer, there's like no one here. So, because everyone's like visiting their family and stuff. So I just had a month of like, oh, I have no one. Where's well, at that point, DJ. It's like, I was so pumped when he moved in. It was crazy.
So when I got moved in, it was really just a good welcome. A lot of the guys came in and welcomed me. But I thought it was going to be super weird, just like living in a monastery. But as soon as I got moved into my room and had everything set up in my room, I sat on my bed. I remember distinctly thinking like, crap, this is way too comfortable. Like I just feel way too at peace about this.
Oh.
So I'll just finish the story. There's a lot more of those kind of like examples, but like the Lord just I kept discerning with action, probably not with the best motives, but I did like take an action, and I was carrying that up with spiritual direction. With I would go to do a daily half hour and like kind of bring all this stuff up into prayer, and through it all, the Lord, like I said, made straight with crooked lines, and He brought me to this, where I'm very, very happy that He did. And
let's go.
Yeah. So again, bring everything to prayer. Do everything with action, and bring everything that we began with. Stability is like the foundational for any discernment.
Yeah,
like be
absolutely.
stable in the Lord, and He'll bring you to your vocation, whatever that may be.
And with a community in all aspects is necessary for a vocation. Kind of no matter if it's a clearly communal vocation like a monastery. I mean, family is a communal vocation too. But yeah, I'm also very convinced that vocation discernment cannot be done in a vacuum. Yeah, obviously a spiritual director as an absolute minimum, but you need to have other people around you who are supporting you in your discernment, who you speak with, and whether they're other people who are discerning whatever you are or not, whether they're people who are dating, people who are in seminary, whatever, it doesn't matter. It just needs to be an ongoing conversation. So you say out loud the things you're thinking and feeling and that you're praying about. Because if it's only in your head, that's all it's ever going to say. And right? And like you said, we overthink and then we never do. And it can be really, really powerful to voice out to other people, hey, well, I'm thinking about doing this, thinking of going on this visit. Well, now you put it out there. Hopefully, if you have good friends or good family, someone at some point is going to say, hey, did you actually ever go to that monastery? And like, at least for me, now this isn't a lot of people, competition is going to be is an incentive. Like you said, prove people. That's why I do half the stuff I do, is just to prove things to people, which, okay, that's a separate topic. I understand that I probably need to work on. But the good point here I'm trying to make is that like community supports, encourages, and motivates us in the vocation. Because if you, I mean, think about it. It's like you can't discern a monastic vocation without actually entering the monastery, right? And it takes 4 years to decide whether you're going to take solemn vows because you need to grow, acclimate, have tension, have joys in this community before you were like, okay, I'm willing to make that my life. So,
yeah.
Cool.
Beautiful.
Great. Let's go. Okay, yeah. So I'm ready to go to bed. I don't know about you. But thanks, Bosco, Brother Bosco. Huff. There's so many. Okay, there's like 3 things I just thought of, but I won't go into any of them. Mainly just how poorly Bosco's name has been butchered in the past.
Yes, many.
Yeah.
There's
my name first and last I didn't see spelled correctly in the monastery until I took simple vows. 1 whole year it took before I saw my name spelled correctly around
his
here.
first name still is not spelled correctly in the monastery.
Is it not?
Is it not? I thought you said today it wasn't.
No, my last name is not spelled correctly.
I thought you said okay.
Oh, well, some people still spell it Francesco.
People still call him Francis.
Yeah, I know. Frankie, Frank.
We grow in holiness, people. Yeah.
I had someone call me Fran, and I almost lost everything. Because like so many of them, I'm like, okay, whatever. But he's like, hey, Fran. And I turned and said, you are never allowed to call me that. He goes, oh, I thought it would. He said, it seems endearing. I said, nope, it's not. It's horrifying. I'm not like an 80-year-old woman. You do not get to call me that. He's like, okay, whatever. So anyways, thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us for another episode of All Good in the Brotherhood. I am Brother Francisco. This is Brother Bosco, monks of St. Vincent. If you're interested in joining or considering monastic vocation, you should come on out. Crash his solemn vows. It's July 11th at 4 p.m. In the Basilica Parish Church, and it's actually not just a parish church; it's our basilica, our shabby basilica. Anyways, again, it's 11:30 at night. It's like wedding crashing, but because it's a mass, you can't disclude people from coming.
Exactly. So please do.
So it'd be cool. You get to see Bosco sing by himself.
Probably cry.
Probably cry. This is gonna be a party.
It's gonna be a party.
Yeah.
If you want to see a grown man cry and sing, come. Plus Jesus. So
there you go. So yeah. That's all I got. So
that's all I have.
Yeah, please follow, subscribe, like, share with anyone you think might be interested or might enjoy, or you are like, let's get this guy discerning a vocation here. Send it on to him, that'd be great. Until then, hope you have a wonderful, fantastic day.
Peace.
Bye.